They say no one stays in the old Reynard house past midnight. Locals whisper stories about what happens when the clock strikes 12. Voices in the halls, shadows that move without light, and footsteps in rooms long sealed shut. Most people in the town avoid the place entirely, especially after what happened to the last family who tried to live there. But for three college friends, Ayan, Zoya, and Imran, the house was the perfect spot for a late-night thrill. A forgotten estate on the edge of town, abandoned and untouched for over 20 years, rumored to be haunted. It sounded like the perfect setting for a night of urban legend hunting. Or at least, that's what they thought. The air felt wrong the moment they stepped inside. Dust hung thick in the air, and the silence pressed in like a heavy blanket. Every creaking floorboard echoed louder than it should have. But they laughed it off, pretending not to notice the unease crawling up their spines. They set up their cameras, determined to document the experience for their YouTube channel. Ghost hunting, they joked. Midnight horror vlog, the perfect content. But as the clock neared 12, something changed. Zoya began hearing faint knocks coming from upstairs, even though they hadn't gone past the front room. Imran's camera refused to stay focused, glitching every time he pointed it down the hallway. And Ayan found a door at the end of the corridor that wasn't on the floor plan. A door that was cold to the touch. They should have left then, but curiosity got the better of them. One push, one creak, one step across the threshold. And by the time the clock chimed 12, the house was no longer empty, and they were no longer alone. The room behind the strange door was nothing like the rest of the house. It wasn't dusty or worn down. It was clean, untouched, like time had frozen inside it. The walls were lined with old paintings, portraits of people none of them recognized, but each face seemed to follow them with lifeless, glassy eyes. A cold draft drifted through the air, though there were no windows. Ayan stepped inside first, holding his flashlight high, trying to laugh off the goosebumps crawling up his arms. Maybe it was some kind of study or office, he said, but even he didn't believe it. The room didn't belong in a house that had been abandoned for 2 decades. Zoya stayed close to the door, arms folded tightly. She didn't say much, but her eyes scanned the room nervously. Something felt off, and it wasn't just the sudden change in atmosphere. There was a silence in that space that felt unnatural, like even sound refused to exist there. Imran set his camera on the tripod, adjusting it to capture the room. Guys, we're getting serious footage here. This room wasn't on any map of the house. No one's mentioned it online either. It's like it's been hidden. His voice echoed slightly, which was strange, because the walls were covered in thick fabric. As he moved closer to the far end of the room, he noticed something beneath a faded rug. He pulled it back slowly, revealing a large symbol carved into the wooden floor. It looked old, with strange markings surrounding it like a ritual circle. The three of them stared at it in silence. Zoya finally broke the tension. What if this room wasn't meant to be found? Before anyone could answer, the lights on their equipment flickered, then died. The room was plunged into darkness. The temperature dropped instantly, their breath now visible in the air. And then they heard it. A slow creaking sound, like someone walking across the floor just behind them. But no one had moved. Ayan turned around sharply, shining his flashlight toward the doorway. It was closed, and they were sure none of them had shut it. Ayan grabbed the doorknob and twisted hard. It didn't budge. He rattled it again, louder this time, still locked. "It's stuck," he muttered, trying to hide the panic in his voice. Zoya backed away from the center of the room, her eyes locked on the symbol carved into the floor. The lines of it seemed to shimmer faintly now, like they were glowing just beneath the wood. Imran pointed his flashlight downward, and even in the dim beam, they could all see the pattern had shifted. The markings had changed positions, not dramatically, but enough to be sure it wasn't the same. There's something here, Imran whispered, his voice shaking for the first time since they arrived. Something's watching us. Outside the room, the rest of the house was completely silent, unnaturally so. Not even the sound of wind brushing against the windows, as if the entire place had sunk into another world. They all felt it. The house was breathing around them. While Ayan kept trying the door, Zoya crouched near one of the portraits. It was a woman in a deep red dress, her face pale, her eyes fixed on something outside the frame. "Guys," she said, "this painting, it's warm." Imran and Ayan turned to look. She was right. The canvas was warm to the touch. The paint looked fresh, almost wet. Imran leaned in with his flashlight, squinting at the edges. "Wait, that's not just any painting." Zoya stepped back. "What do you mean?" "It's her, the same woman from the article I read last night." He dug into his backpack and pulled out his notes. Marianne Reynard, the original owner's wife. She vanished in this house in 1952. Never found. They said she was obsessed with the occult, claimed she used to hold midnight rituals in a hidden room. "This one?" Zoya's voice was barely a whisper. Before Imran could answer, the lights in the room flared on for just a second, long enough to show the portrait had changed. Marianne was now looking directly at them, and she was smiling. Zoya stumbled back in shock. A cold whisper drifted through the room. None of them could tell where it came from, but it said one thing: "You've finally come home." The silence that followed that whisper felt heavier than before, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Ayan stared at the painting in disbelief, its eyes now unmistakably locked onto theirs. The smile on Marianne's face wasn't kind. It was knowing, cold, and full of something ancient. Imran's grip tightened around the flashlight, his knuckles white. "We need to get out," he said quickly, his voice barely holding together. "This isn't just some haunted room. It's a trap." A sudden knock echoed from behind the locked door. Once, then twice. Then a slow, steady rhythm that didn't match anything human. Zoya was frozen near the wall, staring at the floor symbol again. "It's pulsing," she whispered. And it was. Faint light throbbed in the carved lines like a heartbeat, timed perfectly with the knocking. Ayan tried to stay calm, but his thoughts were racing. Maybe this house wasn't just abandoned. Maybe it was sealed, for a reason. "No one ever talked about this room," Imran added. "No one even knew it existed. What if it only appears at midnight?" Zoya nodded slowly. "That would explain why no one's ever come back with footage from inside here. What if it's not just haunted? What if it traps people?" The knocking stopped. Then came a new sound, soft footsteps across the ceiling above them. But there was no second floor, at least none they'd seen. A low hum started to fill the room, and the temperature dropped again. The camera on the tripod flickered back to life on its own, the screen blinking as it began recording. Then the voice returned, louder this time. "You should never have opened the door." The light surged, casting harsh shadows across the room. One of the paintings crashed to the floor, and behind it was something none of them had noticed before. Another door, smaller, older, hidden in the wall. Ayan didn't hesitate. He ran over and pulled at it. Unlike the main door, this one opened easily. A cold breeze blew out from the darkness beyond. It wasn't just another room. It was a narrow stone tunnel leading deep beneath the house. Zoya hesitated. "Do we go in?" Imran looked back at the locked door behind them, still unmoving. "We don't have a choice." They stepped inside, one after the other, the tunnel swallowing the light from behind them. The deeper they went, the more distorted the sounds became. Whispers echoing from the walls, their own footsteps sounding distant, like they weren't walking in the same space anymore. Old symbols covered the stone, and the further they moved, the more the air felt thick, charged with energy. Finally, the tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. At the center was a stone altar, and around it, candles that lit themselves as they entered. And standing by the altar, in the flickering light, was a shadowy figure in a red dress, waiting. The flickering candlelight barely reached the corners of the chamber, but it was enough to show the figure clearly. The woman in the red dress, Marianne Reynard, stood still beside the altar, her eyes glowing faintly with a golden hue that didn't seem natural. Ayan instinctively stepped in front of Zoya and Imran, his heart hammering in his chest. He wanted to say something, anything, but his throat felt like it had closed up. The air down here was thick, almost humming with energy, and something about this place felt older than the house above, older than anything they'd ever imagined. Then she moved, slowly, not walking, not floating, something in between, like the space around her shifted to make room. Her voice filled the room without her lips moving. 3 souls, bound by fear, drawn by curiosity, just like before. Imran looked at the carvings on the altar. They weren't just symbols. They were names. Dozens of them, etched deep into the stone. Some faded, some fresh. One of them stopped him cold. Ayan, your name's on here. Ayan's breath caught. He rushed over and saw it clearly. Ayan Malik, carved into the stone like it had always been there. Below it, in a second line, was Imran's full name, and Zoya's. All 3, etched perfectly. Zoya backed away. No, we've never been here before. That's not possible. But it is, Marianne's voice whispered. This isn't your first time. You've been here before, many times. And you always choose to forget. A second twist began to unravel. What if they weren't just random visitors exploring a haunted house? What if they were part of the curse itself? Suddenly, Zoya clutched her head, stumbling as a flash of memory hit her. She saw herself standing at this altar, but dressed differently. Older clothes, candlelight, a chant in her voice that didn't feel like her own. I've been here, she gasped. I saw it. I was part of something. Marianne stepped closer. You helped seal the door. You all did. Decades ago. But sealing it only delays the hunger. A groaning sound came from the tunnel behind them, like the earth itself was shifting. Imran pointed his camera toward the entrance, but the screen went black again. She's not the ghost, he whispered. She's the keeper, the one who calls us back every time the door weakens. A deep rumble rolled through the chamber. Cracks splintered across the floor as the symbols began to pulse again. From the far end of the room, stone shifted, and part of the wall slid open on its own. Behind it, a staircase wound downward, deeper into the ground. Marianne smiled, but it was cold. You still have a choice. Go back, or finish what you started. They didn't understand what they had started, or why their names were etched in a place they'd never seen. But they were about to find out, because something far worse was waking up below. Ayan stepped forward, drawn toward the open staircase even as every instinct in his body told him to run. The pulsing beneath their feet grew stronger, like something massive was shifting deep in the earth. Zoya and Imran followed without a word, their faces pale, eyes locked on the shadows ahead. Whatever was waiting down there, it was tied to them, tied to the strange memories, the markings on the altar, and the curse that had brought them back. As they descended the spiral steps, the air grew thicker, almost electric. At the bottom, they entered a vast circular chamber, far older than anything above. In the center stood a massive stone door covered in unfamiliar symbols, glowing softly. Around it, more names were etched into the walls, hundreds of them, possibly more. At the heart of it all was a pedestal holding an ancient book, its pages open to a ritual written in a language none of them could read, yet somehow, deep inside, they understood. This is the seal, Imran said quietly. We helped close it once, but we never finished the ritual. That's why it keeps calling us back. Marianne's voice echoed again, but this time it wasn't from behind them. It was within them. Finish it and be free. Leave it undone. and return again. Ayan reached out and placed his hand on the stone book. His memories came rushing back, flashes of a past life, the three of them younger, different, yet the same, performing the sealing ritual to trap something ancient beneath the house. But they'd stopped halfway. Fear had pulled them back, and now the seal was cracking. Together, they placed their hands on the door. Their voices, unsure at first, began to chant. The chamber shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The symbols glowed brighter, until a blinding flash of light burst from the seal, forcing them to look away. Then silence. The chamber was still. The light gone. The seal, unbroken. They had done it. But just as relief washed over them, a quiet laugh echoed from the shadows behind. They turned slowly. Marianne stood at the edge of the light, but her face had changed. And this time, it was Zoya's. Zoya blinked, frozen in place, unable to process what she was seeing. Marianne, no, the version of her, stood still with that same eerie smile. But her features were now Zoya's, not just similar, identical. Ayan and Imran turned toward her, confused and unsure if they were still seeing things clearly after the intense ritual. But Zoya didn't feel like herself anymore. It was like something had been taken, or left behind. The voice that came from the copy wasn't quite Zoya's. One of you had to stay. The seal always demands a keeper. The doppelganger's expression softened, almost sadly. It was always meant to be her. Zoya stepped back, instinctively reaching for Ayan's hand. No, I don't want this. I didn't agree to this. But deep inside, she felt the connection. The seal had marked her. Not just now, but before. From the first time they'd been there. She had led the ritual once, and now, again. Imran looked at her, his voice low. You knew, didn't you? Somewhere deep down, you felt it before we even entered the house. Tears welled in Zoya's eyes, but she nodded. I just didn't want it to be true. The chamber began to tremble gently, not with fear, but with closure. The light from the seal faded, and the strange energy in the air began to settle. Marianne, now fully taking Zoya's form, stepped back into the shadows. Go, before the house forgets you again. With one last look, Zoya turned toward the staircase, but only Ayan and Imran walked up. Her body stayed behind, standing still at the edge of the seal. A soft smile played on her face. Peaceful now, not haunted. Outside, the night had faded into a pale morning sky. The house looked quiet again, just an old structure wrapped in mystery. Ayan and Imran stood at the front steps, barely speaking, their minds still reeling. They didn't remember everything. Not clearly, but they knew one thing for sure. The house at midnight was more than haunted. It was alive, and now it had chosen a new keeper. As they walked away, the house seemed to exhale once more. Silent, waiting, until the next door opened.